another lesson on why we are foolish to continue with our measuring system. But let's just do it. We can't change it from measuring. Measuring. Yes, ma'am. Did I give you one?
Yeah.
You lost it. Well, I don't know what we can do about that. We'll have to see. Does it have a little hole in it that you can keep it in the binder? What advice, does anybody have advice on how to not lose the ruler, Victoria?
Keep it in your binder.
In what fashion? Just in the pocket, in the free binder, in the hole, super glue it, weld it on there? I don't know. Well, how are you gonna know some of that? Anyway, do this for me and you will see why. This is why we need to get rid of our whatever we call that, our customary system. It really is a silly thing, and I need you to do this. It'd be nice if you could draw a straight line, but some of you can't. But if you had on your piece of paper that you're drawing on, you know, take and draw just about as big of a line as you can, like the same way, like this, and put a 0 here and a 1 there. So go across your whole piece of paper, because this is going to be our inches, and this is, after all this, you'll see why, you know, the metric system doesn't have any of this stuff. Mostly we need to get rid of it because we have to use fractions. And fractions just rarely are your friends. Life would be very hunky-dory if we could just measure it to everything to the inches. But since things come smaller than inches, we have to be able to measure smaller than inches. Okay, so that's where somebody must have at one time said, well, let's cut our inch in half and make this a 1/2 inch mark. Which, if you're measuring to the nearest 1/2 inch, this really would be 0 halves, and this would be 2 halves, right? If you really measure. And then, ladies and gentlemen, somebody said, well, a 1/2 inch isn't small enough because now I got, you know, the width of my pinky, I'm trying to measure that. So then they took their 1/2 inches and they cut them into, I'll even draw a different color over top of it. They cut a 1/2 in half, and now we cut our inch into 4 equal pieces, which means we have no fourths, we have 1/4. Oh wait, I should have done the math. I have 2/4, I have 3/4, and I have 4/4. But the problem with this, children, is nobody will ever tell you that they need 2/4 of an inch. When you measure with rulers, you have to use what we call the simplest way to say it, which means this. You know, if you measure something to the nearest fourth, and it ends up being right here, you have to call it 1/2, not 2/4. Okay, and that's what makes this whole thing. Well, somebody at some point said, my little 1/2, my little 1/4 inch marks aren't enough because I want to measure like the width of my...
Heel.
Now we'd have to go something bigger. What's like 1/8 of an inch wide? I don't know.
A nickel.
Yeah, nickel. I want to measure my nickel. Well, and if you measure nickel, that's smaller than 1/4. So they took every 1/4 and cut it in half. And I'll put little colored marks here for each of these.
Why?
So now we have all these. We've cut our inch into 8 equal pieces. So we have 0/8 here. We have 1/8 here. We have 2/8 here, but we can't use 2/8. We have to call it 1/4 if that happens. Then we have 3/8 here, which we can use. We have 4/8, but we can't call it that, and we can't call it 2/4. We have to call it 1/2. Then we have 5/8, which we can use because there's nothing above it. 6/8 we can't use because it's the same as 1/4. 7/8 we can use, and 8/8 we don't use because that's a whole inch. And then, last but not least, well, our nickel was fine, but a dime is so much smaller than a nickel, then we had to cut every 1/8 inch in half to get a smaller unit of measurement. So now, we have now cut everything into 16ths, because I need to cut this into 16 pieces. 1, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is what your ruler is cut into, 16. By the way, it gets smaller. There is cutting 16ths in half, 30 seconds, and they do 64ths and even whatever. And then sometimes they go into hundreds of inches and tenths of inches, and they flip-flop back and forth. But anyway, this is 0/16ths of an inch. Then you have 1/16th of an inch. 2/16ths we won't say because it's the same as 1/8. 3/16ths we can say. 4/16ths we can't say because it's the same as a quarter. 5/16ths we can say. 6/16ths we can't say because there's 3/8. 7/16ths we can say. 8/16ths we don't say because it's a half. 9/16ths is good. 10/16ths is not. There's 11/16ths. 12/16ths we can't say because it's 3/4. 13/16ths is okay. 14/16ths we don't say. 15/16ths, and then there's 16/16ths. So there you have it, and maybe we should do this. Maybe we should square off what we're actually allowed to say. Okay, if it's no 16ths, we say it's 0. 1/16th is a good thing to say. You can't say 2/16ths, you have to say an 8. You can say 3/16ths, but you can't say 4/16ths. You can say 5/16ths, but you can't say 6/16ths. You can say 7/16ths, but you can't say 8/16ths. That goes way up to a half. Okay, we'll just keep circling all this stuff till everybody's happy and excited about all of this.
Yeah. Woohoo! Learning. Learning.
And like I said, the problem is, children, the book will say measure to the nearest 16th of an inch, okay? But you have to understand, just because I'm measuring to the nearest 16th of an inch, that doesn't mean I can't say a half of an inch, because a half inch actually is a 16th inch mark. So if you're measuring to it, you can say 1/2, even though you say, well, it said measure to the nearest 16th. Well, a half is in 16ths. Same thing with this. If it comes out to here, you can't say 12/16ths, but you have to say 3/4 because that's just the easy way to do it. And you have to remember, wait, can I shrink this down? I can. I mean, this is all in the span of 1 little inch sort of thing, which is only, well, hey, can I get it down to 8? No, what if I could take a picture of it and shrink it to an actual inch? Wouldn't that be exciting? Wouldn't you guys love to see such things? So here is my inch. Let's get it to, what was that?
I think my pencil just flew out through the book and each.
Let's see if I can get that to real. Let's see if we can get it to real size.
Oh.
All this we have to do all in the span of something that's about, oops, I flipped it over. Nice.
Wow.
Wait, does that look like it's about 1 inch?
Little
It's a little smaller. I do that. I can't. I don't even know where it went now. It's gone.
to the left.
Wait, I'll find it. Here,
Yay!
we'll just blow it up.
We found it. Get it?
So-
Too big. Not too big.
And then you have to remember, that's between every inch, because the actual title of this section was mix numbers with number lines. So when you're measuring whatever line it is you're measuring, you have to make sure you get to that thing. Anyway, look at, let's see, what's going on back there? Look at page 90, please, and take out your little ruler. And we're going to measure it, make sure you got the gist of what they're talking about. And if you don't, it's doing the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And remember, inch is about bottom of your little ruler. The top side is centimeters, the bottom is inch. And then measure line letter E, and it says measure to the nearest 16th of an inch. The nearest 16th of an inch. To which you're going to tell me, measure to the nearest 16th of an inch. Who thinks I got it? Make sure you start right on the end of your ruler. There's that first line for letter E. Letter E is how many 16ths of an inch? Wrong side, Victoria. Yeah, you have to go above. Actually, you have to put the ruler above the line. Who's got a measure and reading on that? Andrew, you got a wait, is your book open? What'd you come up with when you measured that? And again, you could sit and count every 16th till you get to where you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, and then reduce it when you get there if you want. It doesn't really matter.
4 and 1/16.
Wait, letter E? You say that's 4 whole inches? There's no 4 there.
1 inch.
No, unless your ruler's way off. I don't get an inch. Peyton says.
2 inches? I mean, no. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's 2 of anything. Frankie?
4/16.
4/16?
14/16.
Well, you can't say, that's the problem, Frankie, is it might be 14/16, but that's not an acceptable answer. When you say 14/16, you have to say 7/8 of an inch. Because that's what the rule is. Is that what you got, 7/8? My book actually said 13/16, but 2 things. Those rulers probably are not super accurate, and secondly, your book might be wrong. So I would accept either one of these 2, probably 13/16 or 7/8. And again, Frankie, that is why this is so hard, because you have to use the right measurement. I told you, like when I would help my dad work on cars, didn't I? He'd have a 1/2 inch. He'd say, "Go get me." He'd say, "Go get me a 1/2 inch wrench," and I take it to him and go, "Oh, this is just a little small. Get me the next size bigger." And what is the next size bigger than a 1/2 inch? Well, 1/2 inch. The next size bigger would be 9/16, but you had to figure that out because it's not entirely obvious. Oh, okay, 9/16. Good. We'll get it there. Anyways, look at line letter F. Now, letter F is 2 full inches. So you have to put 2 and what's the mixed number? What's the fraction? 2 and what? 2 and what, Trevor?
2 and 1/4.
2 and 1/4 is what I get. Because if you measure it, goes 1, 2, 3, 4 16ths over, which you can't say 4/16, you can't say 2/8, you have to say 1/4. And that is still measuring to the nearest 16th of an inch. Again, that's why I think so. How about letter G? What mixed number stands for letter G? Letter G. Eddie.
3 and 3/16.
That's what I have, 3 and 3/16. And again, if you had plus or minus a 16th of an inch, which means 1/16 less than or 1/16 bigger than that, I would probably give it to you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I need you to focus. Andrew, you with me? Laser. I want laser focus here. Look at letter D. Point A represents what mixed number on that number line? Let me just give this to you. I'm going to draw it up here kind of as it is there. No, I won't. Yes, I will. Letter D comes somewhere between 1 and 2. Here's 1. Here is 2. And then I believe it has 1, 2, 3, 4.
Last spaces. There's 6 spaces.
And it goes right here? That's what it's pointing to? What is that point right there? Well, let's all start off at the same point. We know it is 1 whole unit over, but what fraction is it up to number 2 there? What fraction? Kelly? We know it's between 1 and 2, so we get 1 whole unit over here. You got 0, 1. What fraction of that, I guess?
1/6.
It is not 1/6. But you're close, maybe. Jacob?
1/5.
Jacob says 1/5.
1/5. 5, 6, 1, 5, 6.
1 and 5, 6. Let me caution you, children.
Oh,
Do not count the tick marks because that will confuse you. You can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and go, oh, this is 6 sevenths over. It isn't. You have to count the spaces. 1 space over, 2 space over, 3 spaces, 4 spaces. It is 5 out of 6 spaces over. It's 1 and 5, 6, not 1 and 6 sevenths. People get that wrong all the time. They count the tick marks, and you're not supposed to do that. It would work if you didn't start with the one that you're at. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 6. But people will start there and go, well, that's 1, 2, 3, and it messes you up. Wait, let's do one more. There's got to be one more on this thing. Is there? Look at problem number 29. Problem 29, yeah, I'll give you that answer. Problem number 29 is what mixed number? Problem 29 is what mixed number? Sam Sleezer. You have the same problem? Oops, not a lot. Oh, yeah.
4 and 1, 6.
4 and 1, 6 is correct. There are 6 spaces, it's 1 over. And then last but not least, let's actually measure. Let us actually measure. Oh, wait. Then I do have one more piece of note paper. Let's measure problem number 11. What do you get when you measure problem number 11? In your book, problem number 11, page 91. What do you get when you measure such things? If, in fact, you are measuring that thing there, you would get, Maggie Kulichek, what'd you get?
3 and 3/16.
You are correct, 3 and 3/16. Again, if you had 3 and 1/4 or 3 and 1/8, I would probably give it to you because that's plus or minus. And then last but not least, look at example letter B or practice letter B on page 90. What number is halfway between -2 and -3? Have we had halfways before?
Yeah.
Like if I asked you what number is halfway between 15 and 35,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
how do you do that?
Line.
It's average. But this one said, what number is halfway between -3 and -2? If you think about that, what number is halfway between? By the way, you're cutting it in half, so there's a little tick mark there. It would be what? Max?
3 and 1/2.
No, 3 and 1/2 is actually between.
Or negative.
No, still, -3 and 1/2 would be here because -3 and 1/2 is between 3 and 4.
Oh.
You're between 2 and 3, which is
2 and 1/2.
-2.
Negative.
You have to think negative numbers, and when you think negative numbers, it gets a little goofy. So, you got it. All right, for tomorrow.